Hello everyone, this is Dr. Arshan Hotchandani again, and again we're going to talk about another set of toys that I like and I use often, which are called rubber dam clamps. And we'll go into the detail of the different types of clamps, and of course the ones which I frequently use, I'll show you all of them. And you can order these from different companies. They have different numbers, but what you need to know is the shape that is the most commonly used, and the application. Right, they're not as scary as they seem to be. They're quite easy, and you can start with a few in your inventory, or you can have multiple clamps based on the kind of situations that you generally like to treat with rubber dam. Right, so let's just basically understand. The first type of clamps are something like this, which have no wings around them. So these are called wingless clamps, and the other one is something which has like a little wing or a fly on it, like a little extension. You see this here. These are kind of winged clamps. Okay, this is another clamp which is winged, so this also has a wing on it on the side, as you can see, and they have these little extensions in the front. So these are basically winged clamps, and something like these are your wingless clamps. Okay, now another broad division between both of these, as you can see, is the inner side of the circle has no teeth or no like rough or jagged edges, versus this which has teeth or jagged edges on them. So these are basically called tooth clamps, and these are basically just regular smooth rubber dam clamps. Right, now what these teeth that are on the inner side of these clamp does for us is basically it increases the friction or the retention of these kind of clamps. So they're great when you have mutilated teeth that are badly broken down, and in such situations these clamps come in really handy. Okay, now let's talk about our day-to-day use. Basically for my day-to-day use, I like to use wingless clamps, which are mostly like these. Right, the advantages with wingless clamps is, if you can see, they have these edges which kind of turn in. You see this little in-turn of the edge, the same way this one which has a straight edge, versus winged clamps which have this little portion that's kind of protruding out from the sides. Right, now what this wingless clamp does for me is it offers two main advantages. One is I prefer to place my rubber dam after I have placed my clamp on the tooth, and I always prefer to do this because that way I can check the fit of the clamp as well as the stability of the clamp, and then place my rubber dam around it, especially if it's a single tooth isolation. So that's my preferred technique, and with these wingless clamps it makes placing the rubber dam around the clamp much more easier. Right, and for single tooth it's a very fast method of isolating your teeth. So wingless clamps are fantastic for single teeth or up to 2 or 3 teeth, where you're going to place the dam around the clamp and then start isolating the teeth in the front. So wingless clamps are great. Second is because their edges are straight or slightly inturned, these edges allow you to place a sectional matrix or a matrix band very easily, also a wedge. Right, so in such situations where you're isolating, where there is a tooth which is mutilated way deep, and you want to use a dam with a sectional matrix to isolate the tooth, and then eventually do something like a class 2 or a proximal wall build up for a pre-endo case, in such situations these kind of wingless clamps are very good because they do not interfere with the placement of the wedge as well as the placement of the matrix band. Right, and these winged clamps, like I said, they are fantastic, and especially if they're toothed. Like I said, the toothed ones are helpful when you have grossly broken down teeth, mutilated teeth which are partially erupted. For those kind of situations, these clamps work great. Right, now most of the times when you end up using these clamps, it is you have to carry the rubber dam along with these clamps. So basically your wings help you to hold the rubber dam on the clamp itself when you are placing the clamp and the rubber dam together, versus with wingless it's a little bit more trickier to place the rubber dam along with a wingless clamp. You still need to know how to do it a couple of times before you can actually go ahead and do it much more easily. So in my personal experience, if you're using a wingless clamp, go ahead, place the clamp first and then place the rubber dam on top of it, versus with a winged clamp like this, what you prefer to do is you can carry the dam on the wings as well, with the forceps and place the dam as well as the clamp together in one go. Now when would I do something like this is when I know that I'm working in the posterior regions of the mouth, especially the upper molars, because what happens is when you just place the winged clamp with the dam together, it's a one-shot process, versus when you place a wingless clamp and then to get a dam around it, it becomes a little tricky, and especially because you have the coronoid process of the mandible, which kind of interferes and gives you lesser space in the posterior maxilla to place the dam around the clamp once the dam is already in the clamp is already in place. So always, preferably for posterior maxilla, I like to use these winged ones so that I can put the dam, the clamp, everything in just one go, and all I have to do is then just evert my dam, and that makes my life much more easier. I hope that tip helps you to work, especially in the posterior maxilla. I found working in the posterior maxilla extremely challenging, and I hope that tip really helps you. Right now, if I have to work in my posterior areas, starting from the premolars, this is the clamp that I prefer to use. A wingless clamp gives me great space. Another one that I like to use is this one, something like this. Now a smaller beak like this and a smaller hole like this is more easy to use, especially if you have a prepped tooth, like a prepped premolar or a prepped canine, where the crown was removed and now you're doing a root canal on a tooth which is already, you know, pre-prepared. So these kind of smaller clamps are great for such teeth, even for canines in the lower anterior. I really like these. Of course, upper canines are also fine, and upper premolars also work great. But these are also fine, but this beak is slightly more wider. I mean the space between the two beaks is slightly wider. So it's mainly, I think, a premolar clamp. That's the choice that I have for these. Another clamp that I'd like to show you is this kind of a clamp, which is a clamp which has two beaks. But the beaks are kind of, you see, they are projecting inwards. They're kind of more inclined towards it, the inner side of the tooth. And these kind of clamps are mainly used when you have a partially erupted tooth, or when you want to grab the tooth from way underneath, like the depth of the tooth. And these help in retracting the gingiva also very well. So these kind of clamps are also fantastic for those kind of situations. Right, again, these are quite tight, and you will have a good degree of soft tissue retraction as well, and based on the size of the tooth you can use them. The third one which I told you is these kind of clamps which have a tooth, but if you notice here, one side of the clamp is slightly broader, like this shape is broader, versus this shape which is slightly narrower. So generally this broader side always goes on the buccal side of the tooth, and this narrower side always goes on the lingual side of the tooth. So if I had to say this clamp to be applied in a patient, I would say this would be easily used in a fourth quadrant situation, or something like a second quadrant situation, right? So diagonally across. So that would be really helpful, because this would engage the buccal side, and this is, like I said, smaller, but because the serrations are present or the teeth are present, it's engaging the tooth even if it's a broken down tooth. So this kind of clamps are great for that kind of situations. Another clamp that I really like to use is something like this, which is just a regular clamp. It's just nice and round, but because the beaks are nice and sharp and they're kind of turning inwards, I love to use these clamps for molar endos. Quick application, easy, and then even if you have to do a build up or a class 2, you don't have to take your dam off. These beaks, which are very narrow and nice, they allow you to easily place the matrix band around it. Okay, so coming back to these, again, winged clamps, but the only difference here is no teeth versus teeth here, right? Again, equal C's on both sides versus unequal C's. So you've got to decide that these equal C's which are here, these are basically for full formed molars. So I love to use these for upper or lower molar teeth, which are large in size and are adequately intact. They don't have any major broken walls, versus these which are mainly, like I said, preferred for cases where you have broken down or mutilated teeth. Again, a great tooth which has all walls, I prefer to do something like this. This is a little bit more square form, a bigger, sturdier clamp. So again, wide molars which are broad buccolingually as well as mesiodistally, these kind of clamps work great. Now another great clamp to have in your toolkit is this clamp, which is the 212 clamp, and this is fantastic because this clamp can isolate even the smallest of the teeth, the narrowest of the teeth, and I would say it's a great clamp to use all the way up to your second premolars and even in the lower anteriors or upper anteriors. The key to do using this clamp is basically this clamp has a little slope. If you look at it from the side, there's a little slope to the clamp, like it goes down. So always make sure that the slope is away from you, facing away and buccally. So that's how you want to clamp this clamp. Sometimes you can also do a modification of this clamp, and that's called a modified 212 clamp, and I'll show you that as well. I have. So basically what you do is you take a 212 and you cut it into halves, and then you can use one half for just isolating teeth which are smaller. The problem with this clamp is that you absolutely have to place this clamp after you place the dam. There's no way of placing the dam around such a large clamp, you know, so you have to isolate your tooth first and then only put this clamp on it. This again, like I said, gives you more room to work, so you can section your 212 into one half and the other into the other half, and based on which quadrant you are working in, you can use this, right? Again, this is another great clamp to have, which is called the Brinkers or the B4 clamp. Now, I'm not a really big fan of this clamp because personally for me the clamp here itself is not that tight or rigid. So unless and until you have a great tooth which is already isolated with something like a rubber tie or a floss, and then you can put this clamp for an additional retraction. Again, mainly for anterior teeth up to premolars, works great. But like I said, this clamp is very slippery, so it's a little rocking sometimes. It's very hard to get great stability by this clamp alone, and especially if you're using like a heavy rubber dam sheet, this clamp alone might not give you enough retraction, right? When you look at clamps also, they come in different colors. So you can have something like this, which is a matte black clamp, and the same version in satin steel. If you personally ask me what difference does it make, not really. It's just if you're into doing dental dam photography, then these clamps are great, right? Now I have basically two sets of clamps. One is from this kit or this system that's called by Hager Worken, and these clamps are also great and very nice and easy to maintain. But another set also that I personally have is by Colteen, and the great thing about Colteen is they're color coded, so you can of course train your assistants and they can know, and you can tell them, oh, give me the brown clamp or the yellow clamp, you know, and it makes it a little easier for them. But besides that, yes, this Colteen's kit is great, and it's a great starter kit to have, and it has almost all the important necessary clamps in it. So if I had to really tell you which is the absolute must clamps that you have in your kit, of course 212, if you're doing a lot of anterior work, great clamp to have. This little clamp, again, round edges for molars, right? And you need something like this, which is for broken down and mutilated teeth. So this is a great clamp to also have in your inventory. And last but not the least, of course, something like a clamp which has deep beaks like this, so you can isolate a partially erupted tooth. Thank you guys for watching. I hope that helps, and we will come back with the next video maybe on another topic, and looking forward to your subscription. So if you haven't already subscribed, please go ahead and subscribe to our channel, and we will be more than happy to put up more videos. Thank you and have a great day.